Yeah, and we actually do have the game going now, so it is going to be what looks to be Tempo Mage versus... tough to tell at the moment. It could be Handlock, it could be Reno Lock, I guess. There is a Molten Giant in there, but Reno do play Molten Giants now and again. Or it could just be straight up Handlock with a Dart Peddler, potentially. So there's, it's still interesting to see what the Warlock actually pulls out here.
Yeah, and it's hard for us to decide when we're actually seeing both hands. How hard is it for the players when they only see the cards that hit the table, and they have to assess really quickly what they think that's going to be?
Yeah, and they start off with a Dart Peddler, and interesting choices. It's always a bit rough in terms of this matchup specifically, because we talked about Warlock, but on Mage, especially before any cards have been played on the Mage side, you have to mulligan and play very differently, whether it's Freeze Mage or Tempo Mage, the two most common archetypes. So it's really difficult to make that Dart Peddler choice and be like, oh, I just don't know what I need here, but he did go with Soulfire. And Vortex is just going to drop a Scientist, and this is really nice as well, because going off the back of what I said, like, Maynard still doesn't know which type of mage it is, and it's really rough to try and deal with this situation here. Although Imp Gang Boss on 3, pretty safe.
Yep, and we're just having a moment of technical difficulties, but yeah, both players still don't know what they're up against for sure, which is really interesting.
Yeah, now that Vortex has dropped a Shredder though, and there is the secret, it's it's all given away now. The secret is the Mirror Entity, and now Maynard has to play a little bit safer, I guess. He's actually chosen to tap and not drop the Twilight Drake on turn 4 purely because he's afraid of Mirror Entity. Because if you give that mage a card or anything reasonable size like a Twilight Drake, you're in some trouble. He's following up with the Unstable Portal as well, and wow, Mysterious Challenger for Mage. How many more secrets is he running? Vortex is playing the Tempo Mage, and it's... I don't know if you'd agree, Lorinda, but it's fairly common to see one Mirror Entity and one Counter Spell, and that's pretty much it. But, we've seen some players play Duplicate as well, so we'll see if this Challenger for 3 mana is, going to pull anything else for Vortex here.
Yeah, one of each is pretty common now. You do sometimes see double mirror, and of course, with this being a tournament, you may see somebody... There's no point mixing it up massively in a group stage, because word gets out after one game what you're doing. So they won't try anything too tricky with the secrets. We did see Life Coach, for instance, run Eye for an Eye as a secret in one event, but he only had to win 2 games with that deck.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll be seeing too many surprises in that way in this.
So we do see the Challenger come down. Just to take a note, though, that Maynard actually got a really good Mirror Entity target off for him there. He just dropped a Zombie Chow. It's about as safe as it's going to get from his Warlock deck. And he is running double Molten, so this could still be Reno. And he's just one of these guys that seemingly doesn't get destroyed by RNG and just never draws the Molten. The second Mirror Entities come from the Challenger, actually. So, interesting that Vortex has gone for 2 Mirror Entities and no Counterspell whatsoever. Because it works it's sort of like the ultimate mind games at the moment, because Maynard now's like, well, a lot of decks run one of each, so now do I have to try and burn a spell? So then, or you can get best of both worlds here. Drop a Dart Peddler, pull a 1-mana spell like Power Overwhelming, and if it was Counterspell, he could easily just throw Power Overwhelming away to burn that Counterspell and then carry on. But got a really good turn, getting the 2/2 down and dropping Twilight Drake. He's under a little bit of pressure because there was a 3-mana 6/6 played last turn, and the Tempo Mage's hand is still pretty damn full. But he's doing okay for now.
Yeah, he has a handful of stuff that can deal with a lot of things. You got to try and find time to get that Thaurissan on the board to reduce all these costs. That won't be immediate, because he does have to deal with the immediate threat of the board, but as soon as he can get that Thaurissan played, if he can do it reasonably safely, he'll be in a great position, I think.
Yeah, you're getting so much value from Thaurissan, and it's one of the cards we're going to continue to see, hopefully, once standard format kicks in, as again one of the very solid legendaries today. And when the legendary count gets cut down a little bit in terms of cards like Lotheb, is it going to be used even more? But here, Vortex is doing the Flame Waker Tempo Mage things, where it's like, yeah, I'll just drop down the Sorceress, the Flame Waker, and then do silly things. He's probably going to click, he even gets the 1 hit, so he can throw away the 1/1 instead of the Dart Peddler 2/2. So that's looking pretty nice. Maynard under a lot of pressure, and so far we do not see a Reno anywhere. The double Molten Giant, though, if he can sort of try and ensure he survives one more turn, and the Siphon Soul onto the 6/6 might be the way he does that.
Yeah,
And then double
that's
Molten is going to be pretty nice, especially now that he's drawn Defender of Argus.
yeah, that'll put him into a really good spot, and it'll play almost like a handlock at that point, which is kind of strange. Interesting to see the double Molten Giant. It's not a common choice. It was a common choice right at the start when Rhinos was released. People trying double Molten, double Peddler,
Yeah.
and then that went away. Then it came back, and then it sort of looked like it had gone for good.
Oh, this is nice. So the Soulfire going onto the 2/4 as well. The Flame Waker's dying. And you know what? Dark Bomb going away, not the end of the world, actually. If one of the Moltens went, he would be in some serious trouble, I think. Although Dark Bomb is nice to remove the Tempo Mage's smaller minions, everything else in his hand is pretty reasonable. Maybe, BGH would have been okay to throw away, but most Tempo Mages play Dr. Boom, so that's nice to just instant remove it.
Yes, and from this side, Maynard's going to... Is Vortex going to play around Molten to some degree here?
What you've got to think about now is, with his hand, he only has Frostbolt as burst, right? So there's probably no reason not to play around it. 4 damage changes nothing. Effectively doesn't really change anything whatsoever. Dropping a Scientist as a 2/2, it makes you more weak to AoE, because then that's all the minions you have dead, potentially, to say a Hellfire with a Mortal Coil or a Shadow Flame of some sort. I quite like this, actually. He's playing safe both ways. He isn't pushing too hard with the Frostbolt, there's just no need, because it's not setting up. It's doing nothing he can't do next turn. And he's actually keeping a minion in hand. Although we know there's no other secrets in the deck, if his board gets wiped, he can actually just follow up with a... and just play the 2/2 as a minion and just have something on the board at least. And this is scary. Ooh,
very scary stuff.
The Argus. I mean, the Thaurissan wouldn't have made much difference, but the Argus kind of hurts a little bit. And there's Dr. Boom.
You've got to wonder what isn't in this deck.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rough one. There's so many, in terms of the Warlock, do you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if this is more of the demon variant with the Void Callers, purely because of the Doom Guard. But yeah, there's so much flex in a Reno style deck that it's definitely hard to deal. Oh wow, are we gonna see Molten? Oh, he can't really play Mal'Ganis here.
No, he can't safely get it down, and losing that Defender of Argus is actually really important to him here. Yeah,
this is rough. He actually even taps to try and get what I imagine to be the Reno. Or the Healbot. He has double Molten, but even the tap now...
Fury or anything, that would have been just a way to protect these things. Just losing that Defender was unfortunate in the highest. He's going to really struggle to find a play here that doesn't lose.
What's a shame for Maynard here, actually, is if he didn't tap, he wouldn't actually have just been dead unless the bombs, did something. But with 2 8/8s and the BGH on the board... the likelihood of the bombs hitting the minions is actually, fairly likely when you've got that much health and power on the board. But there we go. I mean, the Tempo Mage taking a pretty decisive win there. So Vortex goes 1-0 up and his Mage is gone. He does have his Paladin and his Druid, which are 2 pretty staple classes at the moment.
Yeah, and both are going to play in a similar fashion to the Tempo Mage, give or take. And so... maybe that lock deck's going to be a bit of a problem, because Druid's pretty decent against it, and Paladin definitely has at least a 50-50 in my opinion. I know you think that maybe the Reno lock's a slight favourite against Paladin.
To be honest, the more I've played it, I think Secret Paladin, of course, we're talking about. It could be Murlocs, it could be other types, but Secret Paladin is obviously the most common variant at the moment. And I think that it's it's very close. I would probably just go with 50-50, to be honest.
Because I'm happy to meet in the middle on that.
Yeah, because the trick is, the Paladin needs to build up the board. If the Warlock can have Reno and clear the board, then he wins, right? But if you can't do both, you're in some serious trouble, because you can Reno, but normally by the time you Reno on turn 6, the Paladin has the board and Mysterious Challenger down, and then they hit so hard that the extra health the Reno's giving you, you're back to square one the next turn. And unless you have something like a reduced down Twisting Nether or a big Shadow Flame with a heal, you're really going to struggle to actually get back.
Yeah, we do see actually this Tempo Mage here for Maynard as well, so... obviously, that's the tech of choice in Group B, at least. So
yeah, there's been a lot of players actually laddering with Tempo Mage recently in the past few weeks. It seems to be, I think, because a lot of people are playing Druid, seems to be really popular. And Tempo Mage actually stands up against Secret Paladin fairly well, because it can clear the board quite easily in terms of the Flame Waker mainly clearing up all the smaller minions, and you still have things like Fireballs and the Entities cause a problem because the Paladin wants to get the board, and cards like Mirror Entity, Frostball, Arcane Blast, Arcane Missiles, they all just basically battle for the board or clear your opponent's board. So Tempo Mage, pretty good pickup here. Little bit slow. I don't know whether I like it. This is a real tough one actually. He's going to Arcane Intellect to draw more cards. A lot of people would either just drop the Scientist or the Flame Waker just to try and get something on the board, but the Minibot kills the Scientist so easily.
Yeah, and one of the things about this matchup is as long as you're not going to get completely beaten, to death rapidly by the Paladin, as long as you can plan it so you're ahead going into turn 6, and you can get that board sorted out by then. You may have taken 12, 15 damage, but if you're ahead going into turn 6, then the Mysterious Challenger loses a lot of his power. Maybe you've drawn a Fireball by then to get rid of him as well. You get to manipulate the secrets better if you're on the board. And so maybe he just decided to take a time out there, get his hand filled up, and work out how he's going to plan about getting ahead by turn 6, rather than the immediate danger.
Yeah, these are pretty awkward hits from the Flame Waker, actually just creating more minions on the board and more room to play around with. Double Noble Sacrifice is definitely not what the what Vortex wants to see. With those two and Tyrion, not the smoothest curve once you drop the Shredder there, but yeah, this is a tough one because on one hand Vortex does have that board, and the Noble Sacrifice can do some work a little bit later on. But on the flip side of that, Maynard's actually got a pretty good hand to like follow up with himself. And at the moment, he can get Dr. Boom down before his opponent gets his bomb that he's got in his hand, which is Tyrion at the moment.
Yeah, and Vortex has got a really difficult decision because he's facing a mage who hasn't done much, who has 5 cards in hand. And from his side, he's got to work out... No, we can see that actually the mage's hand is kind of... It's got a lot better now. It was kind of mediocre before that. But from Vortex's side, he can see Fireballs and Frostbolts, and he has to play around all these things. So he decided to go face there, which was a pretty safe play. And that's an amazing pickup. Yeah,
2/6, going to do some work. Unfortunately, he doesn't actually have any Battlecry minions. Like, he has Boom, I guess.
Boom, yeah. He plays into Boom nicely on curve.
Yeah, he's a long way away from that, I think, though, at the moment. Because you've got to say this board's going to get cleared up now with the Shredder. Another Secret, and it's Redemption. Oh, no. Vortex is doing the Secret Paladin thing that sometimes it happens, where you don't draw how you want to draw.
Going to happen every time. That actually only happens once in a major tournament to you. It's like... Yeah, this is the thing they wanted Secret Paladin to be punished by, which just doesn't happen that often, and it's pretty grim when it does. Yeah. He's getting a lot of damage here. This is going to be very tight.
I really like this hold for... If he holds Redemption, this is... No, don't play it. Okay, so the reason I like the Redemption hold is if your opponent clears the board, you just play Redemption pass, then drop Tyrion. And then it's like, what does your opponent do? Like,
I just wonder if maybe he's thinking he doesn't have time. Maybe he's thinking if he top decks Boom or something next turn, what do I do? And also maybe he thinks it'll make Maynard make a mistake.
And let's be honest, if he aims at the Shredder or the Minibot, he probably doesn't even need to get to Tyrion. Oh my god.
And even the 1/1 might be... Okay. It's just one step closer to lethal. Because it's so close, he may have just weighed up that the 1-2 points of damage that he was going to get here are just worth more than holding the secret back.
Yeah, the ping on the Minibot's going to be okay.
Going to be really close. Not quite sure how Maynard will deal with Tyrion, though. Like, he hasn't got enough damage into the Paladin early to really have a good way to finish this off with direct damage or anything.
Yeah, and Mustafa Bal's actually one of the better cards Vortex could have drawn. He isn't threatened on health. What he needs to do to close this game out is to just present too many threats for the mage to deal with, because the mage is on 4 health. A true silver champion ends this game, and with no taunts and the water elemental not on the board, there's nothing he can really do about that. But now the issue is suddenly like Blessing of Kings like ends this game because he cannot clear the whole board. He has to just play Boom, I think, and just go for it, because he either plays Boom. Actually, can he clear at all now that he's attacked in?
He can only kill. He's just got to kill the Shredder and hope for miracles, I think.
So yeah, he does. He just has to. Oh, the face isn't what he was after, and that is going to be game unless this is a mystery ice block, and it really isn't. It was mirror entity.
And yep, up to 2-0 it's going to be for Vortex, in pretty convincing fashion, to be fair. And he's just going to have to win a game with Druid, which Druid's the deck that people bring for Conquest in particular because it usually finds a way to win a game. You bring it to Last Hero Standing as more of a coherent lineup, but in Conquest you bring it just because it's kind of 50-50 against everything. I know that's not quite right, but it has a good chance of everything if it gets a good draw.
Yeah, and I think especially at the moment, because there's so much ramp available in the Druid deck, and like you said, everything's so consistent about it. It's such a like a steady deck to take, just to be like, I can take a game with this deck at some point in any series. I'll be surprised if Maynard hasn't just locked in the mage again. Yeah, he has. Okay,
straight to the mage.
Yeah, straight in the mage. And the reason for this, and it's something that I would do if I'm honest, is so Maynard needs to win with every single, like with all of his classes. He has his warlock we saw earlier, his mage, and whatever his paladin is. Yep. So I personally, and I don't know if this affects groups, which maybe it does in terms of score. I'll have to check on that. But you just want a win, right? You don't want to get 3-0'd. And and the Tempo Mage versus the Druid is actually such a favoured matchup for the Tempo Mage. Things have to go very, very wrong for you to lose this matchup. And I would definitely just want this under my belt. So I like what Maynard's doing here. Just lock in the hard counter, try and get a win, or get your best chance for a win at least. And then go from there and try and build on the momentum. Vortex is a really interesting hand as well. Double Shade of Nax, so he can innovate Shade and then coin Shade to follow up. But the problem is, if he does that and he doesn't draw into anything else early, what if Maynard's got like Flame Cannon? And that's the scary thing with Shades, isn't it? When you overcommit to it, not overcommit, but when you commit to a Shade with a card like Innovate, and then Flame Cannon comes out turn 2, it's like, oh no, that was a 2-for-1 pretty hard, and it buffs the Mana Worm.
And by waiting, it means that Boom and Azure Drake are going to get delayed. And it's really nice to get a turn 2 or 3 Azure Drake on the board, top your hand back up, get a 4/4 down. So, really interesting decision there.
And Maynard's really good at arcane missiling things, as he actually killed that first Shade easily. The third hit the face, right? So it was just like, well, I've got this spare missile I'm not firing, I know, whack him in the face. And again, this is the issue now with the Innovate. If he didn't do that play, yes, we wouldn't have seen the arcane missiles more than likely, but he could have like Innovate coin Drake and then follow up with Nax, the Shade of Naxxramas, and something like that. So when you commit into a Shade and it doesn't pay off, it's very, very expensive for the Druid.
And Maynard here as well, making a really good play, because he realises that if you're going to coin out a Shade on turn 1, if you're going to Innovate it on turn 1, you've probably got another 3 or 4 drop lying around somewhere, so there's a really good time to drop your mirror entity there.
Yeah. Now, imagine if Maynard had Flame Cannon, Vortex would probably just concede. That'd be so upsetting. Oh, wow, so this matchup's really weird, because although, yes, you want the secrets from Mad Scientist, playing Mirror Entity against a Druid when you're coming up to turn 5 and 6 for 3 mana isn't as much of a tempo loss as it is versus a lot of other classes. Because a lot of the time now, like, his Shade doesn't contest the Druid of the Claw. He could Fireball it, actually. But even, like, Mirror Entity, Unstable Portal doesn't put him too far behind. Because you've seen both Shades, and the Druid didn't play a Darkness's Aspirant or anything early on, which they could have done. So, like, he must only have big guys, right?
Yep. And it's interesting he's chosen to go with the Fireball. He thought briefly about playing the Conjurer, which would challenge, but something like a Wrath could have put him in a bad spot there, so he just decided to play the 1-for-1 and carry on. Yeah. He knows that this Shade's going to become like pretty big.
Well, it's effectively unkillable now, isn't it? There's no way for the Druid to kill the Shade until the Shade reveals itself. And this is looking really nice, Flame Waker, and here comes the Mirror Entity. And he is going to trade as well. This is really good.
And assuming he wins this, he's got a really difficult decision to make. Because there may be, we don't know about the tiebreakers, but there may be the case that he wants to go to 2-all. But also he might not want to reveal his Paladin deck, knowing that he's got to play 2 other games in this group with that deck.
That's a really good point. On the flip side of taking the Tempo Mage just to get a win under your belt, like on the other side of that, he will probably play Warlock next. Because why show your Paladin, right? Because everyone, any players that go to a tournament like this, which is closed group stage, within the first set, like, you will know what everyone's playing roughly. You know, like, not every card in the deck, but roughly. And once you know archetypes of classes that have multiple archetypes, like, the other guys in their group now will know they both play Tempo Mage, right? So you play in that, you know, in respect of that, and create your strategy around that.
There may be a surprise card that was at the bottom of the deck,
exactly.
But they know they're both playing Tempo Mage. They know at least 28, 29 of the cards. They know there's no counterspell in Vortex's deck, and so on.
Ooh, I like that pick. Regardless of whether it was the best pick or not, he just took Polymorph Ball, so I appreciate that as a card. This is actually really good as well to burst. As you know, like, you can attack with a minion and then Polymorph Ball it and attack again for effectively Huffer.
And it actually sets up lethal as well. I mean, it doesn't because he's going to get cleared, but it would have been lethal for the extra 4 damage if nothing had happened this turn. Which is always something that the top players are looking to do, is set up a lethal no matter how obscure. Just in case their opponents whiff for 1 turn and it's all over. Yeah,
and look at that, the draw straight into Savage Draw. And even though that was more or less cleared, Maynard's feeling pretty good about this. He goes straight into Antonidas, Mirror Image. Vortex probably concedes because there's no way you can deal with it. But when your opponent has to play Force of Nature and that's it, to clear a board, you're feeling pretty good when you're in Maynard's spot now. But as I said earlier, the deck is so favoured, the Tempo Mage. Things have to go absolutely terrible for him to lose this matchup. But he is going to take it. So he now goes 2-1 versus Vortex. Or 1-2, should I say.
And that goes back to the turn 1 decision that he made, where he had the really tough decision whether to go for the double shade opening or whether to go for a bigger opening that would be slower. And obviously, knowing that he's not favoured, he decided to gamble and go for the quicker gambly opening, which makes sense. When you're not favoured, you might as well take risks.
Yeah, because the second they don't have the answer, suddenly you're ahead. And this is Secret Paladin from Maynard, so he is choosing to reveal his Paladin deck. So again, I'll have to check, but maybe score is important. And now he wants his second best deck against this, just to try and make it at least 2-2. But also what's interesting is Secret Paladin's another one of these decks where, although at its core everyone plays the same cards, there are some differences, and we did just see an owl from Maynard as well. So that's probably going to be a bit of a surprise factor, because that is not a common pick in Secret Paladin.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do with Secret Paladin to make it better or worse against other decks, and things like adding an owl could make you a lot more aggressive than... Paladin is more board control-y than it looks a lot of the time. If you add an owl and maybe a divine favour, suddenly you've got a really aggressive deck.
And when you top deck Wrath versus a 2/3 keeper, that's pretty reasonable as well. Although somehow Maynard runs double redemption, which is also not common. A lot of these secret makeups are 1 comp spirit, 2 avenge, 2 noble sacrifice, 1 redemption, and potentially 1 repentance if you want to push for a full Christmas tree. But 2 redemption again, like Vortex is probably sat thinking, right, there's redemption gone. Next, you know what I mean? And right, there's one secret off the board. Let's move on. Redemption won't happen on that challenger turn or earlier.
Yeah, and I've been lucky enough to have played double redemption, so I can actually talk about this a little bit. And I've played it because people don't play around the second one, and if you can get it down, even if they just sort of don't play around it into a mini bot, let alone a Tyrion or something important, you can just suddenly win a game, if somebody's a bit lazy or, and this might, actually, it's going to be really good here, except you can't get it down because of the Lotheb, obviously.
Yeah, it's going to be nice because this would be a good redemption, right? You either get the Juggler back or the Minibot back. And the follow-up now from Vortex, innovating out the Lotheb's really nice. He's ahead on mana. He now drops down Keeper of the Grove to easily clean up the Juggler. And the Keeper of the Grove being a 2/4 works really well versus Paladin because he... those stat lines match up against a lot of Paladin minions in a positive way, and it normally 2-for-1s regardless of its its actual ability on hitting the board.
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying minion to face against when you've got a bunch of 2/2s and divine shields and 1/1s and stuff. Yeah, it is going to get killed off here, and this redemption's going to be really useful as well, as this divine shield is just going to never go away by the feel of it. But he's running out of things, and you've got to think he's only playing 1 competitive spirit. He's got rid of 2 redemptions already. This mysterious challenger, it's going to be a beefy body, but it's not going to fetch much.
Yeah, it's Lothar again, not a super common card in Secret Paladin. A lot of decks don't run Lothar, but the Mysterious Challenger, as you said, isn't going to pull too many cards. We've seen both redemptions gone. Probably the single competitive spirit is the one in his hand. So yeah, it's going to be a bit tough, and he just has to just straight up tank 4 damage to face, which versus Druid, as the game goes on, you're getting very afraid of Savage Roar.
Yeah, and I mean, he's going to have the noble sacrifice to protect himself a little bit, as that mini-bot just comes back for the millionth time.
He will never die.
And he's going to get the board temporarily, but Swipe, Savage Roar, Shredder are just likely going to mean the Druid can take this. One thing with the Druid, though, you do run out of steam in this matchup. If you don't fall over the finishing line, you do end up losing it.
Yeah, the benefit here for Vortex is that Maynard is in the position against Druid. We all find ourselves, most Druid games, in where you think he's probably got Savage Roar. I have to clear. And then the turn after, when you've just about cleared, he plays some more minions, and he's like, he's probably got another, still got Savage Roar. I have to clear, and that's where you start trading ineffectively, and why Druid is so powerful at the moment. You force so much pressure from such an early point in the game just by doing a little bit of damage, and already Maynard is on combo damage. He's on 14 health, which, although Vortex isn't quite on the 9 mana, like, there is a get down, I believe. The Noble Sacrifice is live.
There was no surprise. It was Noble Sacrifice Avenge that came off the Challenger.
Yeah. So, like, although Vortex knows well, to be fair, if an Innovate happened, Maynard's dead if he had Innovate combo. So, that's how much pressure the deck can put on, and why it's so scary.
And he knows there's no redemption because he's seen 2, so he knows that he doesn't have to worry about the get down quite as much as you normally do, because normally it comes back to life, puts more damage on the board, gets competitive spirited, blah blah blah. He may struggle to work out what this secret is, though, with the competitive spirit being in hand.
Yeah, Druid's always nice, though, because you have a very easy way to proc the get down. Because, like, if he just had the Shredder and no hero power that can attack, then the Shredder has to run into the 2-1, and you know that's happening, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, and this is just pretty brutal right now. And choosing to stick everything just onto that Challenger, and I think he was probably expecting to proc a competitive spirit there, I'm not sure. But
this seems reasonable, though, because he's leaving the 6-5 up, and it's sort of the Shredder probably trades with the Challenger now.
Yes.
If you imagine the weapon didn't exist, and to a certain extent, like, the weapon is probably going to clear up what drops out. We'll find out now. Oh
wow!
Oh.
It's back on the other side.
How does it feel, Paladin? How does it feel? And the problem with the weapon, I was going to say, is that just lethal because of double Savage Roar, and he knows it's not get down, and Druid things, guys. So because of the weapon, he could have killed, say, a lesser minion than the minibot, but he's taking damage, and as I said earlier, at any point the Druid can just kill you with Savage Roar, and there we go, and that's going to be it.
Druid doing Druid things, and Vortex is going to take this down 3-1, and he loves this event as assembly. He just keeps doing well here.